So I always wanted to write about dragons because they're like the most fantasy creature of like any creature, I think. And like when I was growing up, if I went to the library, I'd go to the science fiction and fantasy section, and if it had a dragon on the cover, it usually came home with me. But I didn't, I knew I'd wanted to write about them for a long time, but I didn't know what kind of unique take or spin I would have on them. And then eventually I was like, well, in some myths, you have dragons kind of turning into humans. So I was like, maybe like a dragon shifter approach. And then I got inspired by the fact that dinosaurs have feathers. So I gave my dragons feathers. And then, yeah, I was like, why not make dragons sexy? I guess is where I went. And I kind of knew I wanted to do this star-crossed lovers plot between a human and a dragon. And kind of play with this conceit of like, what if you had betrayed dragons and forgot like that your ancestors had, and you forgot what they had done, and you now worshipped your dragons as gods, but what if your gods hated you? So that's kind of my jumping off point, and then we went from there.
Amazing. Literally, this is the next question. Did you have the story of your book from day one, or was it a whole process?
It was a whole process. So I wrote a lot of this in the pandemic lockdown. The first one, it was like I wanted to write something that was a bit more like wish fulfillment, escapism, like something I knew I would really want to read. But it took a long time for it to kind of fall into place. Like I actually tried to write basically Emberclaw first because I was going to have Arcady go to the university in book one. But then, like, pretty soon in, I realized that doesn't really work. I wanted to show, like, how Arcady, who's like this gender fluid thief, like what drove them to get to the university, what did they actually have to do to get there, why were they so desperate. And so I kind of changed plot one to be this heist between the dragon and the human, having to work together and steal this old dragon claw to see to sell on the black market to pay for university. Basically, I was inspired by ridiculous tuition costs in America and the UK. And it still took a while to fall into place. Like in the first draft, actually, Soren was male and the dragon Evren was female. I can't remember what name I gave her at that point. And I swapped things around. And I wrote like the first 30,000 words of the book like three times and threw it out and kept trying until I found my way into it. So it wasn't like a straightforward process, but I didn't really mind doing the kind of different tangents and turnarounds until I eventually got the story the way I wanted it.
Amazing. So basically, it started from a passion about dragons. I'm curious, do you remember the first story or game or legend, let's say, about dragons that was the moment you said, yes, I'm gonna do that. I like that.
Yeah, it was probably good old Smaug from Tolkien,
Mhm.
and Lord of the Rings. But later on, I think it was this series called Rhapsody by Elizabeth Hayden that came out in the early 2000s that was kind of like the precursor to romantasy, or it was very romantic fantasy. And it has a dragon prince that turns into a hot redhead. And I think I was inspired quite deeply. And then I also really love Robin Hobb's dragons and her approach, which is to basically make them like really giant cats mixed with angry geese, is kind of her dragons. I'm sure there's others as well, but those are usually the main ones that pop into my head. But there's so many good ones out there. Oh, the film Dragonheart, that was a big one
Oh,
with
okay.
Sean Connery as the dragon.
The book explores themes of fate, betrayal, and destiny. Which of those themes were first in your mind, or which theme was first in your mind, and how did the others grow around it?
Yeah, so I decided to kind of play around with prophecy, which I did do in my first series as well. I've now decided I'm never doing prophecies again because they can be a bit frustrating sometimes, or I feel like I've kind of done as much as I'm going to do with prophecies. But I knew that I wanted there to be a really kind of valid reason why both Arcadia and Everett had to like work together, but also and why they would be attracted to each other, but why they shouldn't work, shouldn't be a couple because Evren is a dragon who's been grown like raised in a different world, and he hates humans and all they stand for. So when he's like forced to fall into the human world and has to pretend to be human, which he finds very upsetting, and he's not very good at it either, bless him. He is kind of being forced to slowly unlearn his prejudices, what he's been told, what is the truth. I'm really interested in the idea that like history is told by the victors, or it depends what sources you have for history or who gets to write it down, who's even literate. So that's why the book is kind of all pieced together by an archivist, and why I have like my weird narrative positions and stuff. And you find out who the archivist is at the end of book 2 as well. So yeah, fate and destiny and romance was what I wanted to play with the most.
Thank you. Uh, Also, the magic system feels layered and political as much as mystical. How
Mhm.
did you develop it?
Yeah, so obviously all art is political. I do find it funny when some people pretend that it is not. But for this, I knew I really wanted to kind of play around, especially with gender and sexuality, because in epic fantasy, traditionally it kind of tends to be sort of gender essentialist, or the gender roles are kind of set in stone. You'll have like some flexibility, but there's not usually a lot of, say, like trans characters in fantasy, or it's still kind of expected that like your role in society aligns with your anatomy. And so I really wanted to create a world where gender just wasn't as super essential, because this is a world that is magical, and a certain percentage of the population can shapeshift or go to a healer and quite easily change their hormone production and things like that. So you just wouldn't be quite as married to biology, or you just wouldn't see it as that big of a deal. So I thought that would be really fun to play with and experiment in a fantasy world. And so in this world, it is considered like rude to gender a stranger. You default to they, them. You might capitalize it if they're above you in station, but beyond that, like, you may meet someone one day and then the next time you meet them, they look different because they've shapeshifted or they've changed things around, or, the way that they introduce themselves. Like once they get to know you, they will tell you their pronouns just in like a hand signal. But that might not match what we traditionally would think of. Someone may look very feminine, but use he, him pronouns in this world, and no one would find that weird. And this contrasts in an interesting way to the dragon world, which is very like matriarchal. Like all dragons are lesbians, basically, except for Everin, because he's the only man. And then in this other country to the south, it's very patriarchal, very like war heavy and things like that. So I wanted to have this interesting contrast. But just because the human world is like, or the main world, Locke, is more flexible in terms of gender, doesn't mean it's great in every format. It's very class heavy, so it's kind of easier to move down in society than it is to move up. It's pretty easy to get like locked out of society if you're a survivor of the plague, which I realized later on was sort of like an analogy for long COVID or something like that, or or like looking at historical influences, like how lepers were treated with leprosy. So yeah, all art is political, and this world is political too.
Great answer. Um, what advice, no, sorry. What part of the relationship between your main characters you enjoyed writing the most?
I feel like most characters sort of have like some element of yourself that you've kind of like twisted or refracted, or you imagine like what would this character who has some elements of me and some that aren't, like how would they react to this, how would I react into this environment or this stimulation. So like Arcadia, I think, has a lot of me in them, but is also a lot like funnier, brasher, smarter in terms of like doing crime. I do disappointingly little crime, unfortunately. I really enjoyed writing Everin because he's just so like haughty and like up himself quite a lot. Like and he really loves, he's quite long-winded as well, so he's a bit pompous. He's fun to write. And it was fun writing from the point of view of a dragon and imagining how a dragon would describe things. Like, he first sees a human who has like breasts, but he's not used to that. So he calls them by their actual term of mammary glands, silly things like that. And then it's always fun to write the villains as well. So I enjoyed trying to think about why a villain thinks that they are, in the right, and my villain, I can't say who because it's a spoiler, does have like some valid reasons for what they're doing, but it's kind of like that quote from Brooklyn Nine-Nine where it's like cool motive, still murder. um, and then I also really love Soren in this as well. She's like the assassin who's been silenced and is kind of trying to find her voice throughout the series. And she also has little Jaculus, who's the little wyvern who likes to cuddle. So yeah, it's really fun to make sure that all your characters like stand out and are different and have different beliefs, and how that's reflected in the work. Like Soren, for example, feels like she's so much lower in society than everyone else, as like this low down priest, that she like uses this honorific pronoun where she capitalizes pronouns for almost everyone because she sees everyone as above her in station. Whereas Arcady, because they're like, whatever, what is society and like hierarchy, very rarely uses the honorific pronoun, only for like professors because they do like respect their learning, and the priesthood, but mostly out of like habit than any real belief.
And the last question before we're going for the public, how was the writing process for book two?
Many tears in some respects. So it took a long time for everything to kind of come together with book two, and I was having some kind of health issues as well, and a less than communicative editor at that point, which was also difficult. So I kept, again, kind of rewriting the opening, trying to piece things together. I knew that I wanted to do a university plot and like a trial plot with like three main trials. And it's sort of like my response to like the Magic University, which is always a fun trope, and also probably my response to Harry Potter, because I know J.K. Rowling would hate this world, as someone who grew up like as a Potterhead once upon a time and is now sad that the world is a bit tainted for me, as a non-binary author, of course. And so it was really fun though to create the university and think about like what classes would they take. And so I had a lot of fun writing like the alchemy classes and doing a deep dive into alchemy. And in book one, I do introduce the magic system, but like I don't go super hard into it because I'm introducing the reader to enough stuff, I think, in book one. But in book two, we get to learn more about how magic works and how it can work with others. And of course, Everin and Arcady's story comes back together. But I do remember very vividly when I got to like 100,000 words into the book, I was still only on the second trial, and I was like, it's not going to work. So it took me a couple days to realize my second trial had to go at the midpoint. So I had these 3 weeks of like writing 2,000 words a day, but the net word count just stayed 100,000 words as I like unpicked and restitched where it should be. So it took a very long time to coalesce, and I like lost my confidence quite a few times along the way, but I am really happy with where Emberclaw like turned out and where it kind of ended. Because I originally was going to have it be a trilogy, but my plan for book three was so big that I knew this series either has to be 5 books or 2. So I paused it at the end of 2 for now and taken a little break, but I may at some point come back to the world because I think there is still a lot more to tell, and have like fresh entry points for the reader as well. Could be fun.
Happy to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And for the publisher, when book 2 will be available for our readers?
I already asked that question. Monday, I will have the answer. Okay.
Okay. Good to know.
What would be the 3 main qualities that you see in dragons that set them aside from humans?
Good question. So they can sprout wings, which is a little bit different. And I think they're very, very long-lived. So their kind of viewpoint on like time and events is very different. And they also have a more like naturalistic relationship with magic. Like with humans, they have a very kind of like rigid sense of like you have to do certain spells, or you're more likely to only be able to do one type of magic, whereas the dragons can do sort of different types of dragon magic with less effort. And yeah, I think those are the main 3 differences. And the fact that they're able to turn into a huge dragon as well as a human is interesting and cause some, I think that's what caused a lot of the tension between dragons and humans, like way back when there was the great betrayal, was because humans got jealous, you know, that they couldn't have as much magic, that they couldn't turn into these huge beings and fly. So to them, I think it felt like the relationship between them was uneven, even though the dragons probably didn't necessarily see it that way, or at least some of them. Maybe others did. But that's another thing where at some point it'd be fun to go back into the past and try and dive into that section of history more and look at what led to that great betrayal.
What would you say is what would you say is a unique trait when it comes to your creative process?
I don't know about unique, but kind of the way that I've settled into writing a book is that I've learned that I just really like to edit as I go. So a lot of writers will just write the book kind of all the way through, and it can be really, really rough, but that's what works for them. But I found what I like to do is sort of plan out like the first 6 to 8 chapters in quite a lot of detail, sometimes a little more, just to get a sense of what I think the opening is. And I'll have vague ideas of where it'll go. I'll maybe know what happens in the middle and maybe what happens at the end. But I tend to write those first 8 chapters first, kind of stress test. And those are the bits that take me the longest. Like it might take me a few tries to kind of find my way in and learn the character voice and all of that. And then once I finish those 8 chapters and I'm like, okay, I think they're decent. They're still not great, but they will work. I'll plan out like the next 8 chapters and then I'll write those and then I'll edit the whole thing. So I do this sort of weaving back and forth. And at one point with Dragonfall, I was like handwriting the first draft. And then when my hand hurt, I would go back and edit. So I would be in like 2 different points of the manuscript on the same day, which I don't think was the best way to go about it, but that's how that worked. And I guess my kind of recent way I really like to write is there's a cafe near my house that has no Wi-Fi, and then I leave my phone at home, and so I'm forced to do nothing but write and look at the good dogs in the cafe. And I really like it. It's just around the corner from my house, and like the same people show up every day. Like there's regulars, and I call them my colleagues. And, you know, I don't have to like pay for or like order my coffee. They'll just bring it to me. And if the writing's clearly going very badly and I'm looking distressed, they give me like extra stamps at the end or the staff discount, which is quite funny. And then sometimes they give me free cake. So yeah, that's probably, I guess, my unique writing experience, but I really like it. I would never want to get to a point where I'm like too famous to go to the cafe, which luckily never happens with authors, but yeah, it would be sad to not be able to go write in my cafe.
How long did it take you to build the world of Dragonfall?
I thought about it for a while, and actually, I got a lot of world building inspiration when I went to Romania in 2018. So I got to like convince my university where I was teaching to like send me to Transylvania to go to a vampire academic conference, and I wrote a paper on fairies and vampires and how they were kind of the same in young adult literature. And afterwards, I went to Bucharest for a few days, and then over to Constanta. And I noticed there were a lot of dragons like in the architecture, and like I found that inspiring. And I remember just like jotting a lot of notes about dragons while I was on that trip. And you can see it reflected in the world. Like Vatra, I think, means hearth from memory, and Loch means, I think, place. I think.
Yeah.
Can't remember. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah. And I'd forgotten that I'd like stolen Romanian words until like my friend who's Romanian was like, "Oh, I loved the Romanian inspiration," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I did do that in 2018." So I made like a world building Bible where I'd kind of, you know, put it into subheadings and just slowly fill out the world with like, you know, what were the trade relations and what are the holidays and what are like traditional foods, what are the swear words is always great for world building as well. But I won't fill out like everything because some of it I like to discover as I'm writing. But I also have a terrible memory, so I'll quite often put things in the world building Bible to remind myself. And I think by the end of it, it got to up to like 100 pages of world building stuff, which is probably more than I needed. Like a lot of it never made it into the book. But again, if I ever come back to the world, that will be very useful for me.
What's your take on the discourse that romantasy and romance books are going into fast fashion?
Yes. So I found it interesting because Dragonfall came out at like the perfect teething time of discourse of like what is romantasy and what is not. So this is a dragon book that came out the same day as Fourth Wing, but it's very different. So like a lot of people picked up Dragonfall expecting it to be like Fourth Wing, and then they were very confused because it's many things, but it's more fantasy first, I think, than romance first. So the way they talk, I think kind of the loose definition of romantasy we've agreed on now is that romantasy is more romance first, fantasy second. Like it's not as usually not as interested in like really deep world building because that distracts from the romance. Whereas mine is, I think, more epic fantasy with a strong romantic subplot. But in terms of fast fashion, I think it's more that post COVID, I think there's been a lot more pressure to get things out quicker. And I've noticed not just me, but some other writers have sometimes been pressured to like skip editing steps or have really, really condensed editing and really condensed deadlines to get them out faster. And so I think there is unfortunately a result is that some books maybe are a bit rushed more than even the writer would want. Like I was kind of pressured into skipping line edits for Dragonfall, which in retrospect I wish I'd said no, because I think it could have benefited from one more little pass here and there. Also just because I really like editing and I wanted to make sure I felt I had done my best with it. So at some point I might be like, I got to rewrite this one. Maybe I will make some changes to Dragonfall now and again. Who knows? And I do think there is a bigger push to this obsession with like sprayed editions and special editions and like consumerism in writing or in publishing that is new. I don't know if tariffs now are going to change that in America. But I still think like that's one element of it, but there's still a lot of writers who are really like passionate about their craft and work really hard to make the best books they can. I think it would be nice if readers could be a little bit patient if sometimes it takes a minute for books to come out because you know it is very hard to write a book. And some
Yeah.
people are very, very quick and prolific. Other people aren't. I'm unfortunately not quite as fast as probably publishing would like me to be. Like Emberclaw did. Usually you try and do one book a year, and Emberclaw was closer to 2 years. But I did it eventually, and I think the book was better for it. If I'd released it a year after, I don't think it would have been as good. So yeah, those are sort of my opinions on romantasy and fast fashion. Part of it is systemic. Part of it is also it's hard to make a living as a writer if you can write really fast and you don't mind if you have to skip the steps. That's like for most the only way to make anything resembling a living as a writer, I guess too.
Do you have a bookish hot take?
Uh, I guess that was sort of a bookish hot take. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll think of one. I can't really think of one at the minute. I guess just like, yeah, it should be fine to take your time if you really want to with a
Mhm.
book. It would be like sometimes there's kind of this myth of momentum, like you have to release books really, really fast. And I think it's more like if a book is promoted and marketed, it will sell more, you know? A good book by an author every other year will probably do, that's supported by publishers, will do more than a book released every 6 months with no support, right? So I guess
Mm.
that's my hot take, that's a very lukewarm take, probably.
What's the book you recommend the most?
So anyone who knows me knows that I am Robin Hobb's #1 fangirl, to the point where I dedicated Dragonfall to Robin Hobb. I met my husband on the internet when we were 15, bonding over Robin Hobb's books. He was in Scotland, I was in California. We are still together. That's why I'm in Scotland. So I really, really love her characterization, her prose, her world building. So if you haven't read Robin Hobb, start with Assassin's Apprentice. She will break your heart and make you cry, and then you'll thank her for it. So yeah, she's like my OG. But more recently, I really love Samantha Shannon. I love the work of Tasha Suri, C.L. Clark, bunch of others. Like I feel like we're in embarrassment of riches with fantasy right now. We're seeing some really wonderful books and like diverse books as well. And like I'm so like I can never keep up with my to-be-read list, right? The second Death of Locke comes out today by Tori Bolivano, I think is her last name. And it's really good. There's like a lady knight trope now of a bunch of like gay lady knight books coming out. And I'm like, great, excellent.
Is there any kind of parallel between artists and dragons, like talent being a form of magic?
Sorry, could you say that again? I cut out for a second.
Is there any kind of parallel between artists and dragons, like talent between a form of magic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think definitely with like the human form of magic, I set up that like you have a bit that's innate, like it's easier to be touched by one dragon and say be able to do fire magic and alchemy, but you can still learn other types of magic as well with like time and study, and even to like even if you're naturally talented at fire magic, you still have to practice it to get good at it. So I think it's probably a bit closer to human magic than dragon magic, which is a bit more like intuitive. Because I feel like with art, it's both like a talent but also a craft, right? So like the more time you spend with it, the more time you work at it, the more like muscle you build, like the writing muscle or the painting muscle. And there's a lot of people who are say like naturally talented, but if they don't put in the time to get better, they'll kind of plateau at a certain level. Like I'm decent at sketching and drawing, but I knew if I did it every day, I would get quite good rather than just all right, considering how little I do it. Same with playing the flute. I'm just bad at playing the flute, but again, if I did it more often, whereas I write every day, so I think my craft of that is decent. Like I'm probably harder on myself than anyone else, but I can recognize that most of the time I'm a pretty good writer.
How do you start writing?
Like back, when did I get started wanting to do it like professionally?
Yeah, and also like as advice.
Oh yeah.
How do you just started?
Yeah,
How?
so a lot of it is just like put your butt in the chair and your hand on the keyboard and just go. Like it's something where the more you do it, the better you get. Reading a lot as well, consuming stories in many, many ways. You can look at craft books and stuff like that. Like, you know, I used to teach, pardon me, I used to teach creative writing and I do book coaching now, but I'm always very clear that that's like an added bonus. Like one of the great things about writing is that there's not a lot of like barriers to entry. Like with art, you know, you have to buy the paints, you have to buy the canvas, you have to buy the paintbrushes. Whereas you just need a notebook and a pen or a laptop, which we all have because we're currently on Zoom, and you just open up a Word document or a Google Doc or whatever and just go. I think a lot of it is just like holding your nerve and recognizing that your first draft is going to be kind of not great, but you can't make it great until there's something on the page. And so, yeah, I think like you have to be humble to be an artist or a writer and like recognize that you're always striving to improve. But you also have to, yeah, just put in the time and the graft and trust that like your ability will catch up with your taste, right? Because with your early draft, you'll be like, but I can tell that I'm not where it wants to be. Or even with your first couple books sometimes. But like if you trust yourself and trust your voice, that it'll come out and like blossom. It's like a garden that you have to tend, I suppose.
What are you currently reading?
I just finished Our Wives Under the Sea, which is the like lesbian undersea horror, like short
Read
novel.
it.
Yeah, it's good. And then I'm listening to a nonfiction book about the Renaissance by Ada Palmer, which is quite fun. And I have a book for Blurb that I just finished called Salt Swept by Catalina Watt, which comes out next February. And it's gay pirate disasters, basically. And there's necromancy and there's an otter cat, which I would love to have an otter cat. And yeah, it's really fun. There's necromancy as well. I do love me. My next fantasy book I'm currently writing has necromancers.
Oh, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So it's called A Song for the Undying, which I think will stay. And it's based loosely on 1500s Scotland, like the kind of border wars between England and Scotland, which is a really interesting period of history that I didn't know too much about. But if you look up like the Reivers, Reiver, it's really interesting. It's sort of like this borderland became almost like a wild, wild west frontier kind of thing, a bit dangerous. So the premise of this book is like this island was cursed by a goddess, where when war rises in the hearts of men, those who die by violence do not stay dead. And those who have lost everyone they've ever loved, especially if they're young, have a chance of like activating as a necromancer. So my main character is Kate, and the book opens with her whole family being slaughtered as the war began in a castle. And she's like one of the few survivors, and she escapes and goes to fantasy France. And I skipped the war because I don't want to write the war. I want to write the aftermath. And so 10 years later, she's kind of drawn back to fantasy Scotland because she's given the option of like, you can get your castle back if you marry this necromancer general. And she's going to try and find out why the curse is still lingering in the middle of the island. And then, of course, the necromancer general is not quite who she expects him to be. And there will be like gothic romance stuff. I don't know the back half of the plot, but I know the first 8 chapters. I'm going to start writing them next month.
Oh my God, I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, me too. Like it's been one that's been kind of percolating for a while. But I had to rewrite my Micah Grey books first. But now I'm doing my outlining. I'm getting ready to go into it next month.
Any specific recs that aren't that well known?
I think there's one called like Eat the Ones You Love, I think, by Sarah Maria Griffith, I think is sapphic, but I'm not sure. The Isle of the Sea or something, Tasha Suri's next book is sapphic, I believe. There was like a horror one that's in the other room, but I can't remember what it was called. I will think of a million ones after this. It's always the thing, like on the spot. I'm like, I've never read a book in my life, but after I'll be like, oh yeah, this one. Oh, the work of Grace Curtis is usually sapphic. So like Idle Fire, and then there's some science fiction ones like Floating Hotel and a few others.
Okay.
I've put the links for
Yeah.
the books you've mentioned.
Great.
Which genre do you prefer writing?
I think my heart's always in fantasy. Like I started with fantasy, then I did science fiction books for a while, and now I've gone back to fantasy. I may have one less science fiction in me, I'm not sure yet. And then I have one book that's not science fiction fantasy at all. I've got a few drafts on it, but I'm waiting to hear back from the CIA before I can write any more of it. And it's based on 3 generations of my family history, which is like quite wild. People like underestimate how wild it is until I tell them. Basically, the too long didn't read version is that my great grandmother shot but didn't kill my great grandfather. My grandmother shot my grandfather when my mom was 18, and she testified against her mother in the murder trial in 1973. And she once joked my dad got off lucky because she never shot him. So that's that book. And my grandfather was also a spy, so that's why I'm waiting to hear back from the CIA.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah. So one day I'll release it. It's a very like tragic but like fascinating story. And so doing the research of it was really interesting. And like my mom kind of wrote her own chapters of her character. So it's fiction but based on the truth. So one day I'll release that. Probably under a different name.
The lore is loring today. Do you have a quote you use on a daily basis?
Oh, like a code?
Quote.
Quote.
Like how you mentioned Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh, yeah. I actually had them written on my whiteboard, things I try to remember. One is have fun. It's okay to say no. I'm gonna swear if that's okay. Give fewer fucks. because I'm someone who's so anxious. I like can care too much, and sometimes I should care a bit less. Failure is temporary, as is success. And yeah, I think those are the main ones.
And the last question that I have, what advice would you give younger writers?
I would say, like, again, read a lot, write a lot. Remember that it is supposed to be fun. Like, you're just making stuff up. Like, the stakes are never quite as high as they can feel. And that's something I'm constantly reminding myself. I suppose it changes a bit when it is like your career and you are trying to make a living off of it. But at the end of the day, it's like the stakes aren't that high. You're just making up stories and hoping that people kind of connect with it. Because that's one of the real joys of writing. Like, as much as I can sometimes be frustrated by the industry or things like that, it's so nice when you get a message from a reader who just says like, hey, I connected, I really enjoyed spending time in your imagination, and knowing that like characters I made up are like living in other people's heads rent free is really cool. Like, there's a couple little fanfics of Dragonfall that exist, and that's so cool. Like, I love that. Fan art, things like that. There's Dragonfall merch more recently, which is really cool, through a company called Kingdom of Threads. And I asked them if they could hire a fan artist who'd first drawn Micah Grey art back in 2014 when she was 16. She lives in New Zealand. I've never met her. But to my delight, they did hire her, not even for just my stuff, but they also hired her to do Samantha Shannon's merch as well. So that was a really nice way to just like give back and celebrate creativity, because like, you know, I'm not an amazing artist, so it's always really cool when you see someone try and bring your characters to life. Someone did like a waltz as well based on my book, which is really cool. So yeah, like, just remember that even if you are just writing for yourself and the story only lives on your hard drive too, like, that's still worth it, that's still valid, that's still amazing. Like, I think art is what makes us human, and there's nothing more fun than just playing in your imagination for a bit and remembering that, you know, you can make up whatever you want.
And
Yeah.
also, even if the book at first doesn't do too well, it's gonna be reborn, because
Yeah, exactly.
Pantomime has such an amazing story.
Yeah, it does. So this is the new cover. But yeah, this is technically the third and the fourth time I've sold it. So yeah, when it came out in 2013, it came out through a very tiny, tiny publisher. And it also like was quite an unusual book. Like, the main character of this is intersex, so kind of between male and female. And back in 2013, they were like, what the heck do we do with this? They actually, in the first like cover copy on the back, they made it seem like Jean and Micah were two different characters when they were the same character, like pre and post transition. And they were like, don't talk about it, it has to be a twist. But I was like, I never intended it to be a twist. So they straight washed my book basically. And so it ended up sounding really generic, so it didn't do super well, and it was really hard to promote it if I couldn't talk about the thing that set it apart and made it different. So it's set in like a magic circus, and it's the daughter of a noble family who runs away and joins the circus as a boy named Micah. And it's very much like a coming of age story. There's like a gentle romance and magic returning to the land. I have more prophecies in there. And yeah, like, I started this when I was 19, and like, Micah's been with me almost half my life. And I have like such a soft spot for him. I think he's such a like little cinnamon roll, and he must be protected at all costs. So yeah, it was really great to be able to kind of come back to it 14 years later and to kind of show to myself like what I've learned about writing. And I also wrote it when I was closeted myself the first time. So this time I got to kind of go back to it with a deeper understanding of myself and a better like understanding of craft. I added more magic. I was able to foreshadow things because I know how the whole series pans out in a way I didn't when I was just writing book one. So yeah, I'm really proud of this series. It's still kind of hard to promote it at the minute because, like, you know, they sort of shadow ban certain phrases, you know, and it was weird because I pitched rewriting these in October, like before Trump was elected, and just slowly watched all these rights being rolled back as I was editing it, which was quite stressful. So I think it's maybe a series that's always going to be a little bit niche, I suppose, compared to mainstream. But there are 3 people who have named themselves Micah when they transitioned because of because they love my character. There's one who even chose the name Micah Jean. He's a trans guy in Ireland. So that's the character like after and pre-transition took both names. And that's probably like one of my proudest moments as a writer, like, you know, beyond hitting a bestseller list or winning an award, like that's like the important bit is that connection and like how you can't have more of a connection than if you're like choosing a name based on a character I made up in my head. Like that's so cool.
Yeah. Usually in this chat, there's always that question, and I'm so not angry, but mad because it's usually this question like, if you could rewrite a book, how could you rewrite it? And I'm like, you're right
But I
here.
did.
You have done this, and you've went through this process of going back only to go forward
Yeah.
and even bigger and better. And it's such an amazing opportunity to be able to go back to your story and bring it
Yeah. And make it, yeah, what I'm capable of
light.
doing now. Like it was really satisfying to see what I was trying to do back then, but just didn't have the skill. And I still think like the early versions are very good for something I wrote in like my early 20s. But I was like, but I can do more now. So let's do it.
That's amazing. For everyone and anyone here, Pantomime is available
Yeah, it's
in
out
our
in
store.
English.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point Romanian. We can
Yes.
hope.
We have the publisher here.
I noted everything.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all three are finished. I am like about to get a new agent, so I know they're gonna like pitch it at Frankfurt and stuff. So fingers crossed.
Mhm.
Because it's always really fun seeing your book in another language. So yeah.
What I wanted to say, and then it really clicked into something that I saw you say into an interview, because for me, reading, I don't know how everyone makes their movie, but some books appear as movies and some books appear as animations. But for me, it appeared as an animation from Critical Role.
Oh yeah.
I saw an interview with you where you said you weren't a gamer, but you have started watching the Critical Role people.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, from 2 years ago, have you started getting more involved into board games or even
Still not that much. I watched like the one-off that Stephen Colbert did with the Critical Role people, which was great. And I've read I've watched the Arcane, right, which was based on Critical Role, I think, the animation. Was it Arcane?
No, Arcane is on another game.
Yeah, there's another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I still haven't, but I should get more into it. Like I've never played D&D properly myself, which everyone's surprised by. And like there's a wonderful role like games store like right around the corner for me. But I still haven't done it yet. So
You need to find your group, your D&D group,
I
and then
know,
just
because I think it'd be
do a
really
play.
fun. I don't want to be the DM because that's too much like work. I just want to show up and play.
We do have two more questions, I
Okay.
think. Any deleted scene that would have changed how readers perceived a character?
Ooh, that's a good question. So interestingly, in this book, I did delete a lot from the old version to the new version. Like it's like 20% shorter, and part of it was just because I waffled on about the circus a bit too much. But I also like past me kept trying to like add tension for the sake of tension. So like for some reason Micah kept getting groped a lot in the old version, and I got rid of him being groped, like because it just was unnecessary. So I think that definitely will change how readers perceive kind of just the vibe of the book. Like I made it, it's not quite cozy, I don't think, because there is still like danger and drama, but it's gentler than the old version was. There was some like edginess for the sake of edginess. Like the clowns in it were really, really mean when they were hazing Micah in the old version. And now they still play pranks and they're still not the best people, but they're not quite as awful. And I think that just made like the world better and the characterization stronger as well. Like nothing was lost by getting rid of those elements.
I think it does say something about the earlier fantasy we read because we used to.
Yeah, well, I was even watching like I went through a phase where I only wanted to watch 90s and early 2000s movies this summer, and there was stuff like She's the Man, where
Yes.
like at the end of that, characters were just like flashing the audience or like at the soccer game. And I was like, this makes no sense. This is so unnecessary to like prove your gender. They're flashing people. So I think probably like some weird influence that came into it in the old versions that now I've realized is unnecessary.
We used to overlook so many red flags,
Oh, I know.
especially in heroes and even in villains. And luckily, that has changed.
Yeah.
I think the only show right now that still holds up is Smallville. I
Oh,
also
yeah.
started watching it recently, and I was so amazed by how today it feels, even if
Yeah.
it's in the early 2000s. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Whereas I've started rewatching Vampire Diaries and certain things do not age well.
Yes. There is this need for us sometimes to just go back and like, oh no, oh no.
Yeah, you're like, no, that one's better in the past. But it is
There's
nice when something does age well. Like Ever After is one of my favorite films, the
yeah,
like Cinderella retelling, and that one holds up pretty well.
yes, we did have some good ones, especially the Hallmark
Oh
movie
yeah.
with that ship uh with the Minotaur and the
Oh yeah.
sisters. Those are the good ones that nostalgia still holds them up, and they
Yeah.
hold themselves up just as easily.
For sure.
Okay. We got carried away. Sorry.
No worries, no worries.
Bianca has another question, so I don't want
Okay.
to take from her question. What surprising discoveries did you make during the writing process? I don't know if she meant for pantomime or Everclaw. Emberclaw.
I guess like
I
a
don't have it in
surprise
front of
was
me.
realizing I was trying to write book 2 before book 1. That was frustrating when I realized it, but also kind of exciting because I was like, oh, that's why I was finding it so hard to get into that story. And it was a lot more fun when I was like, oh, I'm going to do a heist book first. That'll be fun because I love like Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo and stuff like that. So I think that was a surprise. Sometimes it's not necessarily like a huge plot surprise, but just like little moments where you realize, oh, this character has this idiosyncrasy, or like this is why the character is like that because of something in their backstory, or you come up with just like a cool world building detail that you pretend you came up like was on purpose. So, for example, in this, all of the noble families are usually named after trees. So, like Loris or Pine or Oak. And then I have this ancient race that's kind of like Fae or whatever that have disappeared a long time ago, and they're called the Alder. And I realized later, oh yeah, alder is also a type of tree. I did not do that on purpose. I was just like, it's elder, but with a letter different. But let's pretend I did it on purpose that way the whole time.
This is part of writing.
Yeah. Sometimes you're like, oh, what it is interesting when you realize your subconscious is like more clever than you are sometimes. And like you'll realize, oh, there was foreshadowing here, or oh, if I just make this little change, it'll be better. So that's where I think kind of just trusting yourself and that the work will like come together later is important. At the end of New Pantomime, I have an essay kind of about my writing process in the US version about like how I'm developing a song for the undying and stuff. And yeah, a lot of it is just being like, I have to hold my nerve and remember it will be good eventually, even if it feels not good now.
I have one last question because
Mhm.
no one else has asked it, so I'm gonna take this time to ask my questions, and then we will be in our frame of schedule. You used to teach, but now
Mhm.
you're coaching. Is there something that surprised you in your students? Something that you found that, oh, I didn't think about that when
Yeah,
building
yeah.
something.
All the time. I think like you learn as much from your students as they learn from you, which is why I really like doing it. Like there's so many times where I'm in a call and we'll be like the writer will be frustrated because something's not working, and then we identify why, and we're like, oh, it's because your inciting incident is too late, or something like that, or you haven't really figured out what your what your character wants. Like there's not enough growth. And then you kind of go away and you're like, oh yeah, that's why I'm stuck on mine. Like it's a similar thing, or it sparks some other idea. So I really like that. And for me, I prefer coaching versus teaching, because when I was teaching at the university level, I had to grade writing. I had to give it a grade and feedback, and it was a lot more like rigid, which I found hard. Like I really miss teaching in the classroom. That's super fun. I miss that a lot. And you can't quite get the same vibe on Zoom as like teaching physically in a classroom. But what I really love about the coaching is that I get to meet them one-on-one, and it's more led by them. So they have like 6 calls and they choose when they book it in. Sometimes they'll go to another coach for a session or 2 and come back. And you just get to meet them where they are and with what their goals are. And it's really satisfying for me if someone like shows up and they've been like really frustrated and not made a lot of progress, and they're feeling like dispirited and disheartened. And if by the end of the coaching call, we get them excited about the project again, and by the end of it, they're smiling and ready to go back to the page, then that to me is really, really satisfying. And why I really like doing it. Because like at the moment, I'm lucky enough I could make a living just on writing without needing to do the coaching. But for me, like there's only so many hours a day I can write anyway. And I just get a lot out of having my colleagues who are other writers and being able to help pre-published writers, or sometimes people who are published and join the novelry anyway. So yeah, for me, it's really fulfilling and helps me kind of give back in a different way, and also have some steady income, because sometimes money comes late, or you never know what your royalties will be. So I'm too anxious. So yeah, for me, it's a really fulfilling part of my like calling as a writer and as an artist. And I think teaching is always a really fun way to just engage with story in a different way too, and help someone else achieve their goals.
Thank you so much for this view into the other part of writing, not just as a writer. Ana Niculescu wants, how can we contact you for coaching?
I unfortunately only do it through the novelry now, which is paid, and it's not the cheapest, I will say, but I do think it's very good value for money. Sometimes I have done like donation calls, like to help raise funds to resettle refugees. So I might do that next year once my deadlines are caught up. I'm a little bit behind on things and got a little bit burned out this year. Because again, I was supposed to lightly edit these, and then I fully rewrote them, and I rewrote all 3 in like less than 6 months and got very tired. So it was like between structural, line, and copy edits, I did the math, and it was like 800,000 words in 7 months. So
Writing like you're running out of time.
yeah, and I didn't want to write it that fast, but that's kind of what happened. But so I took a little bit of a break, and now I'm writing a little bit less intensely. So yeah, it's nice to have a bit more work-life balance at the minute than I did. And yeah, here's the pretty red sprayed edges one again for Dragonfall. This was the Barnes & Noble edition, which was very cool.
We are not familiar with the system through which you teach writing.
So I'll put it in the chat. It's called the Novelry.
Okay.
So yeah, it's like an online kind of writing school, except it's not a school. And yeah, like it's not a sales pitch, but it is an option if you can afford it and want to do it. It is a very good program. But yeah, that's kind of how I do it now. And then I used to teach at Edinburgh Napier University, so I'm not there now, but it's still a really good program, and I still obviously know the people who teach there if anyone wants to go live abroad in Edinburgh for a year. And I think they have an online version as well. So if anyone wants, but there's lots of other ways to kind of do it as well, like beta reading with friends. Like there's a lot of accessible ways to get feedback on your writing if that's kind of beyond your means as well.
Thank you. Alina, here you have your one resource now that you can look into.
For sure.
All the words were coming in Romanian. I am so sorry.
It's okay. I was going to try and learn like a tiny bit of Romanian to like say hello. I think I found it was like salut is hello.
Yeah.
That's about as far as I got.
So I think this is our time. We finished into a timely manner.
Yeah.
We spoke about dragons. We spoke about circuses, and we found out where we can learn more about writing.
Yeah.
And we've learned about the new book.
Yeah, so I do not know how fast I will write it, but hopefully faster, because I think at the moment the like horror fantasy trend is like I'm trying to get on that. And it will be fun. And then after that, I think my next fantasy idea is I'm calling it Sexy Unicorns. It has a unicorn that turns into a hot girl and a hot priest and a hot academic who studies unicorns, and they're going to be a messy throuple, and it's going to be fun. Do I know anything beyond that? No, I will figure it out.
Okay, we're down for it.
Yeah.
Were you a fan of The Last Unicorn as a child?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And also Into the Land of the Unicorns by Bruce Coville. I also loved that book too.
It was time for unicorn revival, so thank you for
Exactly.
that. We are gonna
I'm gonna
wait for
try.
it.
That will be like my 2029 book or something probably, but you never know.
We're gonna be here, hopefully.
No
Yeah.
pressure from us.
No pressure,
No
yeah.
pressure.
Unless World War III breaks out by then, who knows? But hopefully
Yeah.
not.
But let's not end on that note.
No,
We're gonna
let's
be
end on
here for
happy,
unicorn
happy,
revival.
sparkly, sexy unicorns.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you so
here
much.
with us.
Have a good rest of your
We can't
day.
wait for unicorns. Thank
Yes.
you, Andrea, for making this happen, and Nemira for making this happen. And we're gonna go now. And thank you, everyone, for being here and asking your
Yeah,
questions.
thank you very much for coming. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good